So I was driving back just from a grocery shop, and one of the feelings that kind of emerged was this idea of feeling lost. Now, for my generation, anyone that's in their 20s, I think the idea of feeling lost is quite a common emotion to feel, particularly as you're going through the phase of changing jobs, to potentially buying your first home, to the realization actually the friends you had in your early 20s are gone now. They've gone their own separate ways, they've formed new friendship groups, and there you are, feeling alone. To then compound that even further, anytime you flick through your mobile phone, whether you go on Instagram, whether you go on Facebook, you are then bombarded with a range of different influencers or people where they are showboating, flashy cars or big houses or expensive holidays. And naturally, as human beings, we compare ourselves to others, and naturally you look at that and think, hang on a minute, what am I not doing that these people are? And so naturally, as a result of that, you feel lost, you feel like you're potentially inadequate or not good enough. And then because you're potentially in a situation where you spend a lot of time by yourself outside of work, that emotion of feeling lost can sometimes feel overwhelming. To give my take on the idea of feeling lost, particularly as you go through your 20s, I think one of the ways I've been able to manage that emotion and overcome that emotion is the idea of feeling lost but in the right direction. Now you may ask yourself, what do you mean by that? What does it mean to be lost in the right direction? If you're going in the right direction, then surely how can you be lost? Now what I mean by that is you'll often hear the term coined to just focus on yourself. And you'll probably have noticed by now through watching my videos on this channel, I preach the idea of self-improvement, spending time by yourself to work on yourself, giving yourself the opportunity to be by yourself, to reflect on who you are as a person and where you want to be. I think certainly over the last 4 years, I would say ever since I stopped doing athletics, I have really kind of pushed ahead with developing myself from a skill set point of view particularly. And I found that through having that clear focus, when I do go through periods where maybe socially speaking I am a bit lost and I do feel a bit isolated, the remedy to that emotion is that because I'm so focused on developing myself, it kind of counteracts any negative feelings that I may get from feeling socially lost, which I think a lot of you go through. When it comes to the idea of feeling lost, particularly socially speaking, I think the important thing to remember is this, particularly for those of you who are currently going through your 20s. The reality is that most of the friendships you have, particularly in your early 20s, the likelihood is they'll die out because naturally as you go through your 20s, you change jobs, you move cities potentially for some of you, you move to different countries, and so because of that, the friendship group, everyone kind of goes their own separate ways, which is completely normal. But the important thing to remember if you find yourself in that situation is to continue to forge new relationships, new friendships, expanding your social circle so that you don't end up in a situation where you do feel lost socially and you potentially feel isolated, because that's the last situation you want to end up in. I'm kind of in a situation at the minute where I'm developing my career, I'm working hard, I'm becoming a more agile person in terms of my skill set, and whilst yes, I may feel socially lost, I recognise that to overcome that, I just need to strike more of a balance, which is a key message you'll notice that I've really pressed on a few times on this channel, is from my point of view, whilst I'm focused on developing my skill set, I also make sure that I'm now taking heed of actually developing more social connections with other people, which in previous years I always felt like I wasn't good enough or wasn't worthy of those social connections. And I do think, and I touched upon this previously, I do think a lot of that is was driven by a lack of confidence at the time. I would say the key message when it comes to feeling lost is just to understand that, particularly as you go through your 20s, it is completely normal to have or go through periods of time where you are by yourself outside of work. I went through a period of time, probably over a 3-year period, where if I wasn't working, if I wasn't going to the gym, if I wasn't walking my dog, if I wasn't doing house jobs, I was just by myself. And in those periods where I was by myself, I would either go running, I would watch podcasts, and I would always try and watch podcasts with people that I would want to listen to, that I could feel inspired by, and to keep a positive frame of mind. And I found that through doing that, it allowed me to cope in that period where maybe socially speaking, I did feel a bit lost, which I know is something a lot of you do, where if you are by yourself, particularly in the periods where you're just kind of relaxing and you're not doing anything, you'll try and watch podcasts or listen to interviews with people where the message is progressive. It's an upbeat conversation. It's something that you can relate to on the journey that you're currently on. Another perspective to maybe take into account if you are feeling lost is to also recognise that it is potentially a sign of personal growth. So to draw on, I guess, a personal example from experience that I've gone through, I had a period of time where in years gone by, I used to do athletics, so I used to be a javelin thrower. Now, the group I was in was very much kind of a Jack the Lad type of group, which for those of you who don't know what that term means, it's basically a group of guys who are kind of keen on banter and jokes and mocking each other and that type of attitude. I'm sure you probably know what I'm referring to, but I think from my point of view, I got to a position where I wanted to try out new things personally, just to understand what made me comfortable and what made me feel confident in myself. And I remember there was a period of time where I basically used to get my hair permed, and I preferred wearing just all Nike everything. That's what I was comfortable with in my early 20s. Now, the friends that I had at the time, I kind of realised this through a period of being reflective, is that they were not at all supportive of me doing what I wanted to do and me doing what I felt would make me more confident in myself, which really people should support. And I got to a position where I realised that their attitude towards me was not helping me in my growth, and it wasn't helping me in my development as a person. And after a while, it became quite toxic. And as a result of that, I decided just to back away from the friendship group, which at the time was very difficult because you've invested a lot of time, a lot of energy into building that friendship with people. And so to back away from that, to be by yourself for a period of time, I think for anybody would be quite difficult. But I felt at the time it was the best thing for me, for my development as a person, and for at that point in time especially for developing my confidence. And I can honestly say that through going through that period where I ended up being by myself for quite a long period of time and I didn't have that friendship group that I could hang around with, it allowed me to work on my confidence, work on just my general appearance and what made me feel comfortable being me, which is ultimately the most important thing you can do, because ultimately in being yourself you will attract people that can relate to and are attracted to you personally. And I feel that through going through that period of moving away from the toxic friendships and being by myself, it allowed me to organically develop as a person. The other points to take into account as well is that if you are feeling lost, it's potentially because you know you've got decisions to make and you need to make those decisions, whether it's buying your own home, whether it's moving away from that job where it's stagnant and you know that from a development standpoint you need to press on. Whatever the situation is, if you're in that position of feeling lost, just understand that it's a completely normal place to be in. And as I've said earlier, it's reflective of personal growth because it means that you've got decisions to make.